boys and girls. This is Ms. Kathy of Kathy's Kids Storytime. I'm so glad you could join me for this special series of Bible stories on the life of Jesus. Our focus this week at Carolina Camp Meeting for Kids is Fix Your Eyes on Jesus. It is said that by beholding, we become changed. In all of these stories, the characters who beheld Jesus, who fixed their eyes on him, were changed. In these stories, you will hear of familiar Bible characters. The storyline is based on the Bible accounts, but there are some character names that you will not have heard before. That's because the Bible doesn't give their names. I have given them names to help you visualize them as real people. There are other aspects of their lives that I have written into the story also to help you imagine what life might have been like. The main point of these stories is that all of these people fixed their eyes of faith, their hopes on Jesus. He heard their pleas of faith, their prayers to him, whether they were thought or spoken, and blessed them richly because of it. Jesus will hear you too. I invite you to fix your eyes on Jesus, to trust Jesus with your life. Say yes to Jesus and invite him into your heart. If you keep your eyes on him, he will lead you on an amazing life adventure that is just the beginning of spending eternity with him. Won't you start now? I hope you enjoy these stories. Changed by Love. Mary of Bethany stood in the courtyard of her sister Martha's home, arranging colorful flowers in a pottery vase. She still needed to sweep the courtyard and set the table, for there would soon be a group of believers arriving to celebrate the Lord's Supper and pray together. As Mary took her broom and began to sweep, her thoughts went back to her early life here in the small town of Bethany, on the Mount of Olives, very near Jerusalem. Mary had grown up in a loving family. Martha, the oldest, was a typical older sister, always telling her what to do. Mary smiled as she thought of how Martha still liked to do that even now. But Mary knew Martha loved her, and Mary loved Martha too. And then there was their favorite, their youngest brother Lazarus, with whom she had scrapped and played as they grew up together. He had grown to be a handsome young man who loved the attentions of his older sisters. Mary had become a beautiful young woman and had attracted the eligible young men in the town of Bethany. Not only was she beautiful, but she was kind-hearted. They vied with one another for her attention. Unfortunately, one of these young men encouraged her to make one bad choice that led to another bad choice, leading her into a way of life that brought much unhappiness. People often whispered unkind things about her behind her back. Mary's face looked sad as she thought of this chapter of her life. So one day, Mary decided to leave Bethany and move to Magdala, on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, to begin a new life. However, the memory of her poor choices, of her sins, continued to bother Mary and caused her to feel sad much of the time. She thought that God would not forgive her for her sins. Her sadness gave way to feelings of utter hopelessness. Before she knew it, she had been possessed by not just one demon, but 7 demons. 7 evil spirits who made her life miserable, for they would attack her and cause great embarrassment and pain. Mary sadly stopped her sweeping and sat down for a moment to rest. But her face brightened as she remembered what happened next. One day, Jesus came to Magdala. He saw what the demons were doing to Mary and wanted to relieve her suffering. So he prayed over her, crying out strongly to God for his healing power to deliver her from the power of the evil spirits. Mary felt the healing power of God come over her, and Jesus sent the demons fleeing away for good. When Jesus went on a preaching tour to nearby towns and villages, Mary was so grateful for what he did for her that she went along with his 12 disciples and Joanna, the wife of Chusa, King Herod's steward, Susanna, and many others who Jesus had healed of evil spirits and other diseases. Mary and these other women supported the ministry of Jesus and his disciples with their own money by providing for their food, lodging, and other needs. As Jesus traveled the countryside and people came to him to heal their sick ones or to hear him speak, it was sometimes difficult for he and his disciples to find quiet moments to talk, eat, and rest. He often had to get up in the early morning hours while it was still dark, or stay up late at night in order to talk quietly with his Father. Then there were the Pharisees and enemies of Jesus who were constantly looking for ways to argue with Jesus and cast doubt on his ministry. To find friends in a quiet place would be a welcome relief to Jesus. That's when Mary thought of her sister Martha. Why not bring Jesus and his disciples to her home? So, as Jesus was passing through the small town of Bethany, where Mary's sister Martha lived with their brother Lazarus, Mary introduced Jesus and his disciples to them. Martha and Lazarus saw the change that Jesus had brought to Mary's life, and they were truly thankful. So whenever he would come through Bethany, Jesus had a welcome invitation to stop at Martha's home where he could find a place to rest, a delicious meal, and friendly people with whom he could talk. Sometime after Jesus' first visit to Martha's home, Mary decided to pack up, leave Magdala for good, and return to live with Martha and Lazarus in the family home. On one occasion, when Jesus came by on his way to Jerusalem for a visit to Martha's house, Mary had not seen him for a little while. She missed being with Jesus and sat down at his feet to be near him and listen as he taught. That day, Martha was feeling a bit overwhelmed by all the details of preparing such a large dinner for Jesus and his disciples. So when she walked into the room where Jesus was teaching and saw her sister Mary sitting at Jesus' feet instead of helping with preparing the food for Jesus and his disciples, she went to Jesus and said, "Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me." But the Lord said to her, "My dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all these details. There is only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her." As Mary thought of this incident, she jumped up quickly to start setting up the tables for the special meal soon to be shared. She began to put cloths on the tables and went to bring the flowers in their vases. That's when she thought with awe and great joy about what Jesus had done for her brother Lazarus. One day, Mary and Martha had sent Jesus a message that Lazarus was sick. Though he could have gone to heal Lazarus immediately, Jesus stayed where he was for 2 more days. When Jesus told the disciples that Lazarus was sleeping and they were going to go and wake him up, they responded, "Lord, if he is sleeping, he will soon get better." But Jesus told them, "Lazarus is dead, and for your sakes I'm glad I wasn't there, for now you will really believe. Come, let's go see him." When Jesus had previously raised Jairus' daughter from death, there were those who didn't believe that she had been dead but just sleeping. Jesus wanted it to be very clear that Lazarus had died so that the power of God would truly be seen. By the time they arrived, Lazarus had been in the tomb for 4 days. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, saying, "Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask." And Jesus told her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha thought he was referring to the time when everyone would rise again, at the last day, and she agreed that Lazarus would rise at that time. Jesus told her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying. Everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never ever die. Do you believe this, Martha?" "Yes, Lord," she told him. "I have always believed you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who has come into the world from God." Then she returned to Mary and told her that Jesus had come. Mary rose up quickly and went to Jesus. Falling at his feet, she said, "Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw Mary weeping and the others wailing with her, he was full of anger and asked, "Where have you put him?" They said, "Lord, come and see." At this point, Jesus wept. Some thought he wept because he loved Lazarus so much. Others wondered why Jesus didn't keep Lazarus from dying if he could heal a blind man. When they arrived at the cave, Jesus said, "Roll the stone aside." Martha objected, saying, "Lord, he has been dead for 4 days. The smell will be terrible." But Jesus responded, "Didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you believe?" They rolled the stone away, and Jesus looked up to heaven, saying aloud, "Father, thank you for hearing me. You always hear me. But I said it out loud for the sake of all these people standing here, so that they will believe you sent me." Then Jesus shouted, "Lazarus, come out!" Martha, Mary, and everyone present waited, holding their breath. Suddenly, Lazarus appeared at the entrance to the cave, with his hands and feet bound in grave clothes and his face wrapped in a headcloth. Jesus told them, "Unwrap him and let him go." And many who were there believed in Jesus when they saw this happen. What an awesome experience that was. A short time later, about 6 days before the Passover, Jesus and his disciples were invited to the home of Simon the Pharisee for a banquet in honor of Jesus, who had healed Simon of leprosy. Among the guests, Simon also invited Lazarus, who had just been raised from the dead. Martha was serving the meal. As the meal began, Mary, who had heard Jesus speak of his coming death, wanted to show him how much she loved him and appreciated what he had done for her. So she purchased an expensive, beautiful alabaster jar of fragrant spikenard. She opened the jar and poured some of the perfume on Jesus' head and on his feet. Then, with tears, she knelt, kissing his feet and wiping them with her long hair. The fragrant odor spread throughout the room. Judas, who had the money bag, and the other disciples criticized Mary for spending so much money on Jesus rather than giving the money to the poor. But Jesus defended Mary by saying, "Why criticize this woman for doing such a good thing for me? You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. She has poured this perfume on me to prepare my body for burial. I tell you the truth, wherever the good news is preached throughout the world, this woman's deed will be remembered and discussed." Then he spoke to Mary, "Your sins are forgiven. Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." Tears sprang to Mary's eyes as she remembered how Jesus had forgiven her, stood up for her, and appreciated her loving gift. Not long after this meal, Jesus was taken prisoner and put on a cruel wooden cross to be crucified between two thieves. Mary, never one to want to be very far from Jesus, had stood at the cross all through that dark, awful Friday. After Joseph of Arimathea received permission to take Jesus' body from the cross and lay it in a new grave hollowed from rock, Mary and the other women who had come with Jesus from Galilee followed after Joseph to see where Jesus was to be laid. Then they went home to prepare spices and fragrant oils before the Sabbath. They rested, full of sadness, on this Sabbath day. Early on Sunday morning, Mary Magdalene and the other women with her, including Joanna and Mary the mother of James, went to the tomb with spices to embalm Jesus' body. When they arrived to find the gravestone rolled back and no sign of Jesus' body, Mary was in tears and greatly distressed. But she and the other women did not stay that way very long, for Jesus appeared to Mary Magdalene and the other women first after he rose from the grave. She had the privilege of telling his disciples the good news of his resurrection, though they did not believe her. During the 40 days after his resurrection, Jesus appeared at various times to his disciples. Then, before Jesus ascended to heaven from Bethany on the Mount of Olives, he told them to stay in Jerusalem until the Holy Spirit would come upon them with power. They worshipped him and returned to Jerusalem with great joy and were continually in the temple praising and blessing God. And now, as Mary set the last dishes on the table, she thought with great joy of how much she looked forward to celebrating the Lord's Supper in memory of what Jesus had done for her. He had completely changed her by his love. Being with Jesus had been worth everything because Jesus had given Mary hope when there was no hope. He had forgiven her sins. He had cast out the 7 demons, and they troubled her no more. Jesus had truly loved Mary. And Mary was indeed a woman whom Jesus changed by love.